Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 70 of my Metal Vaults, where I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal, to thrash metal, to death metal, to black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all of that excellent stuff, as well as talking about the albums. I will also be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. And everyone knows who this band is, even if you've listened to them or not. And if you've never listened to them and you've already been into metal for a long time, then go check this band out. They are considered one of the first heavy metal bands and also doom metal. And so many bands have been influenced by these guys. And if you know this band, then you need no introduction to these guys. But for those who don't, this is Black Sabbath. And this band here, a lot of you will know one member of this band. Of course, I'm talking about Ozzy Osbourne, who went on to do a solo career in the early 80s and has released so many albums since, well, the first album which I will be covering on here, or it may be the first two albums from his solo career. Who knows? But I will be covering that man himself. But I will first, for this last episode of the year of my Metal Vaults, I will be covering an album by Black Sabbath. And the one that I picked, I thought I'd go back to the very beginning with their self-titled debut from 1970. And here it is, Black Sabbath. A very cool cover right there, very haunting. Love the logo, and of course, there is the mill in the background and the woman standing there next to this tree and the the water, really cool, very haunting. And of course, there's the back. And I think if it does, no, it doesn't. Oh no, well, yes, it does. It continues on. And let's have a look at the CD. Very old school, very retro. So showing the side A and side B, as you would see on a vinyl. We'll show the booklet, a bit more artwork right there. And a bit different there in terms of the cover. Pretty much, I think, showing what it looks like today. And of course, we got the band right here, as well as I think there's a few lyrics in here. Well, there's a few more band pictures in here and pictures of the various releases leading up to this album. Uh, is a poster of the marquee where they would have played. No band picture there. And another band picture here. And I believe that's it in terms of. Nope, that's another band picture here. Not very many lyrics. I think this is a certain release. I can't remember when this was released. So, this is a re-release from 2010. So they were adding a little more stuff in. So that would be 40 years of this album. But this album is over 50 years old now. So yeah, there you go. And this also does the same thing. I'm trying to remember the top of my head where this place is again in the UK, but I still need to visit it. Probably have it in the description below once I look it up once again, but might explore that, of course, when I'm talking about the band and where this particular photo was taken. So, before we talk about this album, let's talk about the band. Let's talk about Black Sabbath. Where did it all begin with this band? So, they formed in 1968 as Poker Talk Blues Band. So, they started out as a blues band, which a lot of you would know, a lot of you wouldn't have known, and would be very surprised by that. But you'll understand once I start talking about this album. And then they changed that to just Poker Talk. So that was in 1968. And then they changed it to Earth. So they were called Earth, still playing blues from 1968 to 1969. And of course, that year changed it to the name we know today, which is Black Sabbath. And for those that don't know where that came from, and you're a horror fan, and well, if you're a horror fan, you would have connected the two already, but just in case you don't, they got their name from a Italian horror anthology film from the same name, which stars Boris Karloff. Highly recommend you check it out. And like I said here, when I said just not so long ago in this video, but the information here that I got is Black Sabbath is generally considered both the first heavy metal and doom metal band because they have elements of doom. Their music's very dark and foreboding, as you will get from this album and also their second album, but more so with this album, I think. And of course, this band was formed by Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. And I mean, this goes on for the amount of members that they've had over the years, but we're talking about the original lineup. And of course, these guys formed in where heavy metal is very, very much rampant. Birmingham. Birmingham, very, very much a big heavy metal city. And I've been there for very many gigs and got to see Black Sabbath there twice when they reformed in 2012. And then the last time was at the trying to remember the name of the big what was it called? It's when they did the last ever tour, and I'm gonna look that up now. As like I said, I like to talk about the bands. Obviously, I talk about the bands as well as the albums. So let's say here, and that was at where is it? Jensen Arena. There we go, Jensen Arena. On the 2nd and 4th of February 2017. I went on the 2nd, but the 4th was being filmed on. Well, yeah, the 4th was being filmed. So we won that. It was being filmed on the 4th. And I did look at some footage and saw one mate on camera, well, appear on camera multiple times. But yeah, that was the last ever tour. It was called the End Tour. And I know when bands say like it's the final ever tour they're doing, but they always come back and do more. I think, but this time it was the last time for Black Sabbath, and I got to see that because I saw him 2012 twice. So I saw him download right after I saw him in May of that year with my mate who was just over the moon about it because my auntie bought me tickets to see Black Sabbath for me and a friend, and I said to my mate Chris, uh, auntie got me 2 tickets, want to come? Didn't hear from him, and then he came back saying yes, and that's just shows you how much Black Sabbath is loved, how many fans this band has had over the years, and of course, very, very different. Very different from all the other bands that were coming out around this time. These guys were starting to do this sound. But before this album came out and they changed their sound to what would be classed as heavy metal now. It was just very heavy bluesy rock because obviously they still got very much blues elements, especially on this album. And you could say also on their second album, which I will mention in a bit. But let's get on to the singles. So the first one is a cover by Crow. It's called Evil Woman, or to have its full title, Evil Woman, Don't Play Your Games With Me. Really cool song. Love it. Very, very cool. There and Wicked World. So this was a two-sided single on Fontana Records, which I don't think are going anymore. Oh, no, wait, still going and been active since 1954. So, and they have Apocalyptica on that. On that, that is cool. And Ensiferum and Nightwish and Moon Sorrow. Pretty cool there. And then we get on. So, sorry, this one was released on the 9th of January 1970 on a 7-inch record. And the last one before we get back to the album was The Wizard, and which also has Evil Woman on there again. And that was February of 1970. Not sure when in 1970, but released that month and that year of 1970. And that was released on Vertigo Records, which yep, are still going today. Been active since 1969 and mainly release heavy metal and rock, and pretty much released a lot of Black Sabbath's releases. It's just primarily Black Sabbath. I think I saw Def Leppard, Dio, which of course did join Black Sabbath after Ozzy was kicked out. Yeah, this goes on for bands, and of course Metallica is mentioned on here as well. Now we get on to the album itself, their self-titled release of Black Sabbath. Now, who was on this album besides the lineup of Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy Osbourne? Guest musicians, we have Roger Bain, who did Jules Hop. So you hear a lot of that, and obviously the blues sound you get with this album. And he's also produced. He produced this album as well as their second album, Paranoid. What was it? Master of Reality, and yeah, that was the last full length he did for them. But the rest are singles. And also for Judas Priest, he did Rocker Roller, which is one of their earlier albums. If you're not familiar with that, go check it out. And also Budgie, which of course is the Welsh heavy metal hard rock, well, hard progressive rock band. No longer going, but very influential indeed. But let's get back to Black Sabbath. Who was, besides Roger producing it, who else did what? So Marcus Keith, Kwef. I hope that's pronounced Keith or Keith. I'm not entirely sure. Did the photographs such as this, and of course added this. I don't know if they added this little effect to it later, or he had something for his camera. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, it being from 1970, not sure. Also designed photographs for Paranoid, Master of Reality, and Black Sabbath Volume 4. And link-wise, or unofficial ones. Um, Cover model. That is Louisa Livingstone, and that is who's on the front. She, if I remember correctly, I think they asked her to if she wanted to model for a album cover. I can't remember the full story, but well, long story short, there she is, and is alive today. And she makes nowadays electronic music under the nickname, let's hope I can say this, in Drebra, in Draber. I think I just said that wrong, but if I can find it, I'll have a listen because it might be really cool. Um, Now for the engineering, we have Tom Alom, who did also piano on track three of Paranoid and track sound, which I think would still be the same song on Paranoid for the Star Gold compilation, as well as engineering the singles for Evil Woman and The Wizard, and this album, Paranoid, and then obviously the final collection box set. Def Leppard did Living Legends, Heavy Rock, Hello America, and On Through the Night. Judas Priest did their 1980 album British Steel, as well as others. This is going on. Um, Wolf, another band there, another heavy metal band right there. And the last engineer was Barry Sheffield, who did this one. Well, this is the only album he engineered by him, but he would have engineered other bands as well. But in terms of like heavy metal, this one. And yeah, that's who did what on the album. But I love the fact that this cover is just so cool. Like I said, it's very haunting. It's dark, and yeah, just an incredible cover. Now let's get on to the album itself. How does it all start? Well, it starts off with the title track of the self-titled album, Black Sabbath, which has the bell, the thunder and lightning, and then you get the guitar, bass, the drums come in with that very doom metal sound, but obviously these guys were doing it way before like Candlemass and Saint Vitus and Solitude Eternus. I can go on for doom bands, but a lot of them would have been influenced by Sabbath. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was the first track from this album because it's got doom metal written all over it. And then that goes on to, because obviously on that track, it's very haunting. It's very slow at first. And then you get Ozzy come in doing the lyrics like, "What is this that stands before me?" And some bits where he's just like he's pleading for help because all this is going on. Like if you read the lyrics, you can see what it's all about. And then that goes on to The Wizard, which has him playing the harmonica, which is like proper, very proper blues orientated song. And one of my favorites, of course, I love this whole album, but in terms of my favorite songs, obviously the title track, this one, Behind the Wall of Sleep, then continues on from that. All the songs still have that blues element, but you can see the basis of heavy metal and doom metal with all the songs. And of course, the longest track is the last track, and that's actually another cover, which I'll get into in a minute. The other one I love, which has one of my favorite bass lines in it ever, like one of my favorite bass instrumentals, NIB, which think I looked up and I can't actually remember what I NIB means, but still, you get Geezer Butler just all on his own with the bass, and need I say more about that? About the bass part? You know what it is. He's just doing a lot of bass soloing, and then it's like the main riff, and then just kicks in right, and then Ozzy again with his vocals, Tony with his just stellar guitar work, Geezer with his very, in some cases, frantic drumming. Very, very frantic. I'm trying to look up what that's. Okay, nothing's come up of NIB. I can't actually remember what the hell that means unless I go on the song. No, it doesn't actually say what the actual if it actually has a narrative in black. That's what they say it translates to. Okay, but I still awesome song. And then that goes into Evil Woman from the band Crow. So I've not actually heard the Crow cover, but I've heard their cover and it's really cool. Very much more bluesy rock, I would say, but still heavy. Still a heavy song. And then we have Sleeping Village. Again, that blues feel with, is blues rock with the basis of heavy metal. And then to end it all off with another cover, which I've not actually heard of the artist who did this cover, the song Warning. Or I might have done, I'm just not clicking with it at the moment, but that ends the album, and what an end to the album it is. And with Black Sabbath, like I said, they've influenced a lot of bands over the years, and a lot of them being, like I've mentioned, three of them: Candlemass, Saint Vitus, um, Solitude, the Turners, and I think Pentagram as well. A lot of the early doom metal bands, so like Saint Vitus formed 8 years after this album was released. They formed in 1978, so very much getting that basis of what they want to do sound wise. Of course, the sound would change over time for Black Sabbath, so still a bit of blues left in their second album, Paranoid, and then it'll gradually go to what would be known as heavy metal later on with Master of Reality, then with Black Sabbath Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, also another stellar release, a Sabotage, Technical Ecstasy, Never Say Die, and Heaven and Hell, which had Dio for the first time because they obviously they kicked out Ozzy in oh when was it 1979 because yeah 79 and then obviously then came back in 85 for a brief time and then 97 to 2006 and then 2011 to 2017. Of course, that's when they split up after the last tour. Of course, going back to the lineup, because obviously the lineup's changed. Obviously, I'll talk about this album, but it all started here, but obviously it all changed there. So Mob Rules had also had Dio, and then Ian Gillan came in on vocals. He was the then third vocalist. And it was on here. Dio came back for the 1992 album. And of course, Ozzy came back for their very last album, which I really like. I'm not sure about anyone else, but there's those who will like it, those who don't. Obviously, that's 13. But it all started with this album, which is a very dark, heavy album, and there's a reason for that. Why it was so different from everything else that was coming out at that time, especially being the late 60s, early 70s, is you didn't have heavy metal. You had bands who were like heavy and that like, had that blues feel to them, like that blues sound. Like, for example, you had Jimi Hendrix and Cream, and there was Black Widow, who's I think very similar in that vein to Sabbath, being dark. Um, oh, there was another band. They did the song "Summertime Blues." Can't figure the name now, but really cool song. That's a very heavy sounding song. But yeah, a lot of bands around there who were doing something completely different from what everyone else heard. But the reason why the guitar tone sounds so different from any of those, any of the bands and artists that I've mentioned, is because if you know the story, Tony Iommi had his fingers chopped off in a metal sheeting factory when he would cut the metal sheets, and the machine came down and cut his fingers off to about here, about there, I think. But basically, most of the nail is gone. So he made those fake fingers out of, I think it was like plastic or something a bit better than plastic, and would put those on ready to perform. And you know what? It worked out. You just had to tune the guitar down to from the standard E tuning to what would be D drop D tuning. And you know what? If it was in the standard tuning, oh, it would have the album would have sounded a lot different. But in the tuning it is, I mean, it became so iconic. A lot of metal bands like later on started incorporating that tuning. Like, yeah, let's do that tuning. And it'll sound better than it'll sound a lot different from like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and so on, and all the new wave of hit British heavy metal bands, like a lot of thrash metal bands, were like, let's go with this tuning, and then death metal, let's do that tuning, or C or B or whichever, tuning evolved. But in terms of that lower tuning, again, starting with Black Sabbath, in terms of what would be a standard for heavy metal tuning for metal bands, and it is iconic and just a legendary album. I usually say one thing, but I will say this is a legendary album, and as early as you can get for, again, that word, the genre of heavy metal, and it is. So the full conclusion of this album, I say it's heavy, very bluesy, because obviously they start out as a blues band. It's well engineered, it's well mixed and mastered. I think it says where it was recorded. Um, look that up. But again, very well done by those who were involved in bringing this album to the public. Um, where was it recorded? It should say. Uh, I know it was recorded in London. I just cannot remember whereabouts it was now. I believe it was. Uh, okay, I can't find it. But either way, very well produced, engineered album. The guitar work, the bass work, the drumming, vocals, everything just fits so well with it. Brings it that level of just excellence. And most importantly, and it what I'm going to say definitely goes for this album. Definitely describes this album. Definitely tells you how much of a phenomenal, influential piece of art is. It's a timeless release. It's a timeless classic, and it is a timeless classic. Of course, again, to mention a lot of metal bands were influenced by Black Sabbath because they were basically one of what considered one of the earliest bands to be classed as heavy metal. And again, as doom metal, and obviously a lot of doom metal bands would be influenced by him, and even those who mix death metal and doom metal together would be influenced by Black Sabbath. And their songs have been covered so many times. I mean, there's countless covers. And if I look up Black Sabbath covers, there's gonna be plenty of different bands that have covered their songs. I mean, Metallica's even done it live. They did Iron Man, which is on their second album, of course. Um, Brutality, who I've mentioned before, on their second album, they covered Electric Funeral, which is also on the second album. But people have covered, um, of course, there are bands that have covered the title track, and yeah, just looking at the covers that are here, there is countless, countless covers. And even just people on YouTube who love to play music covering their stuff as well. And it's great just to see that because it shows you how many bands and musicians this band has influenced over the years. These guys may not be going anymore, but they their influence is still there. It's still very much alive. It's still very much beating. And if I can find all the bands that I know that I've covered their songs, I'll link them in the description below and you can have a listen to those as well. So you can get a different side to this, but obviously listen to this album because again, it's heavy, it's well executed, it's a timeless classic. It will remain a timeless classic. This came out in 1970. What when 1970? 13th of February 1970 though. So this album is 54 years old. Next year, it'll be 55. How crazy is that? It's this album is over 50 years old and it's influenced one hell of a genre, being metal. Countless bands within metal, not just heavy metal, but doom and other cases would some death metal bands, maybe a few thrash metal bands as well, because a lot of their albums started having a lot more faster pace, but not to the extent of like punk rock and thrash, but still. But if you've not heard this album yet, I highly recommend you do and go check out all the other albums, not just the Aussie ones, but the Dio ones, the Ian Gillan ones, and just give them a really good listen because you won't be disappointed. I know there's people out there that would have heard him, but like, nah, not my thing. But that's okay too. You might not like it. That's fair enough. But if anyone's wondering where was heavy metal started, where did it all begin? These guys started it, and it was on this very album, from this very album. So once again, people, Black Sabbath with their self-titled release from 1970, Black Sabbath. I know I've said it twice, but it needs to be said again and again. Once again, the self-titled release. Go check it out. And that is it for another episode of my Metal Vault and the last one for this year. Uh, quickly mention one more collection update, and then that's my last video for the year until next year. But got more Metal Vault episodes in the new year. Still got a lot more bands to do, but I will do that a little bit later. Look through all the other bands that I haven't mentioned yet that have albums that have came out in. Now I'm covering albums from the 70s, still more for the 80s, still more for the 90s, early 2000s. This is going to go on. But thank you, all of you, as ever, for tuning in, not just to this bit, not just to this series, but my other videos as well. It means a lot. Thank you for the support the last like 4 years now, even those who subscribed to my channel way before I changed it to Jake's Metal Chat. But for those who have been following me from my Jake's Metal Chat journey back in May of 2020, thank you so much. It means a lot. Don't think I don't appreciate it, because I do. It means a lot. So thank you very much for doing that. And yeah, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, share it around, comment down below with how you got into Black Sabbath, what's the first album, when you first saw them live, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with everything that I've got coming on. More of this in the new year. Collection update for this year, and that'll be the last video of the year until, of course, next year. I've been Jacob Jake's Metal Chat. Keep the banner of metal well and truly high, and I will see you all in the new year with another episode of my Metal Vault.